Thank you for tuning in to KTSE-Now. And today I have an article I found, or it was brought to my attention by Michael Emotep at the African History Network. And this one is Racism Has Cost the U.S. 16 trillion Citigroup funds, by Christopher J. Brooks. CBS News did the article, and it's it's pretty good. It's a short article, but there's a lot of graphs and stuff like that when you get into the actual study. But the article is very short. It just has some points, and I just want to go over those points together. And I basically got it from what they already had, but it was some real bullet points about what what's in there, and then what the effects were over the past 20 years. And it says not addressing racial gaps between blacks and whites has cost the US economy up to 16 trillion over the past 20 years. And in the middle is, if these racial gaps were closed today, we could see 5 trillion of additional GDP over the next 5 years, or an average add of 0.35 percentage point to US GDP growth per year, and 0.09 percentage point to global growth per year. And inside of these, you got closing the black wage gap could have added 2.7 trillion in income, or 0.2% to GDP per year. Facilitating easy access to higher education for black students could have increased lifetime incomes 90 to 113 billion. Improving access to housing credit might have added an additional 770,000 black homeowners, adding 218 billion in sales and expenditures. Providing fair and equitable lending to black entrepreneurs might have resulted in the creation of an additional 13 trillion in business revenue, and potentially created 6.1 million jobs per year. Now, when I was going through this, at first, I did a lot of reading on the study too, but at first going through this, I was like, okay, well, why are they doing this? And we live in a capitalist society, so of course they're money driven. They understand how much money they're losing just due to racism alone. Now, when you talk about racism as far as restricting access to capital for black people, now you start talking about massive amounts of money, because just racism alone wouldn't cause all of this. But with the structures in place, those structures have to be moved out of our way, and they kind of go into what those structures are, as if we haven't heard them already. But they did a pretty good job of doing that. Now, this is the whole article right here. I threw in the chart right there, but it starts off: America could have been 16 trillion richer if not for inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between black and white Americans over the past 20 years. Now, I like the way that they're just singling out black and white, because when you start throwing in other races and ethnicities, then you kind of muddy the waters, because prior to 1965, really prior to 1980, it was just black and white. So to compare us and our plight to other groups that just got here, that's not fair to us. That's not fair to, our children and, the generations before and after us. But then you see, I already gave you two of those bullet points, but about 13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the economy because black entrepreneurs couldn't access bank loans, which we all know is a huge issue with getting a bank loan and then actually fulfilling it, because of all of the roadblocks in place. Like, they did break down about how as far as with getting the loans, how we're denied more, what reasons we were denied for. A lot of times it was credit, but there were other factors, and I'm gonna leave the link so you could go into the study. But then 5 trillion in gross domestic GDP over the next 5 years, and that would be for the next 5 years if they fixed it today. So I think that because it's this huge push for reparations, that a lot of businesses are getting on board. But I hope that they don't think that they're gonna fix it, because this has to be a government. The government has to back this, so that we get certain protections from the government, so that Wilmington doesn't happen again, Black Wall Street, Rosewood. We need to be able to secure these things. And then the article goes on. The study also highlights the real cost of long-standing discrimination against minority groups, especially against Black people, and particularly in the U.S. So I like how they specify, of course you can talk about minority groups because of course they're here. So for the last 40 years they've been here, and I get it. So you have to talk about everybody. But what they did was they made sure that they singled out, our plight as far as ADOS. And then as I go on, the $1 billion toward helping close the racial wealth gap, including investing $550 million over the next 3 years in encouraging home ownership for people of color. Another $50 million will go toward capital investments for Black entrepreneurs. Now that $50 million number is pretty low, and then the $550 million, which I mean it's got to be a lot more than that. And I don't hear nothing about reparations in it. I just hear programs and things like that. It's not saying who's gonna do it. It's just putting it all out there to where, hey, help them out. Nobody's saying who, things like that. So this is nothing to get happy about. But Citigroup at least is acknowledging the fact that I think everybody knows, but people kind of dance around it. So you get a lot of people that are, the voters and regular citizens, they don't know what the hell we be talking about. Now I wanted to focus a little bit more on schooling, and you can see here every state, and the property tax is basically how a lot of states pay for some of their you can see it's a lot more in some places. Now I'm from Connecticut, and with Connecticut you see how much property tax there is paid for school, and as opposed to state and federal fundings that should be helping out the public school system, but it's really not. And for us, especially where I grew up, within basically Hartford, you got a lot more. I can't say everybody's poor, but I don't know what the standards would be. I don't know how much this person was making, that person, but we all lived in the same area, and most people didn't own their homes. So when you're going to school in areas like that, and the people aren't the homeowners, then there's going to be problems at the school that you can't dictate, as opposed to schools outside of the Hartford area, to where people pay the taxes from the properties paid for the school. And this was, I'm pretty sure they knew this. I don't know how much the ordinary citizens knew about that, but you would think that just the way we were treated, as black people in Connecticut, basically in Hartford, it was like almost like treated like misfits. We were always in the paper for some of the dumbest stuff. You would think that like the way people used to talk about the crack epidemic there, you would think that everybody was just running around shooting each other and smoking crack, but that wasn't the case. There was a lot of good people there, a lot of things going on that, some people didn't have, the job security or the jobs period. And that's what kind of happens. And I'm pretty sure this is what happens in all, mostly all black communities. It's just that ours are so small. So when you look at us, we're kind of sitting on an island. And then once you get out of Hartford, which is only 40 to 50,000 black people, then you have all of these, it's just nothing but white, white. And now you got more Hispanics moving in. But, back when I was in school in the 80s and 90s, it was either black or white, and, or a lot of Puerto Ricans. But, they're citizens automatic. So I never really looked at them as, they kind of was rolled with us. But it was black and Puerto Rican usually rolling together. And this focuses on the actual revenue per student, and you can see it's 11,500 for high poverty in non-white districts, and high poverty in white districts, they get basically 13,000. So you can see right there that same poverty, and then you look at the low poverty, it's the same, it's just a wide gap. And this is how it usually works in, I'm pretty sure, most cities. And these funding tactics, and that's why, I get upset with a lot of black folks that don't really understand that it doesn't matter with a political party. So, you got a lot of black people that think like, oh, we just got to vote Democrat and they'll fix it, when they don't understand that this is the way it is because of them. They're the ones in the cities doing the budgets and things like that. They're the ones making sure that our children get less. Like it's not a Republican there checking to make sure that these Democrat cities are oppressing black people. So I don't know where people get this fantasy idea from, that you're gonna vote your way out by voting Democrat. It is just not gonna happen. So the only way is that you get commitments from politicians to make sure that your children are taken care of. And if you don't have children, then make sure that whatever needs that you have, that those get addressed. You can't address your needs by making sure you vote for somebody that's going to address somebody else's needs, because what they're going to do, they're going to make sure that they lock in all voters except black voters, and then they're going to keep testing us to see what they can get away with. Can they get away with pandering with this? What about if they pander with that? I mean, it happens every 2 to 4 years. So I don't see why we get so emotionally tied up with these elections when we know what's coming. The pandering is coming with nothing on the table. And I heard somebody say, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're on the menu. And we've been on the menu for a long time, and we can't let other groups come in here and then they sitting at the table speaking for us, with all of this minority and diversity, all of them words that just Those are killer words for our generations coming, that's going to be coming in down the road. We need specific policies, and we have to start looking at these different things as far as the wealth gap, as they want to call it, or the lineage gap, however you want to name it. But if you are ADOS, then you need to start looking into these things, because what they're doing is they're banking on the fact that you're not going to read it, you're not going to see what's going on, you're not going to check into these politicians. They're banking on all of that, and we let them get away with it because every 2 to 4 years we think that our only responsibility is to just go up there and vote. But after we vote, we do nothing, and that's not going to help us. I suggest once a month, black people sit down, look into these politicians, talk to people that about politics, like, hey, what have you heard? What have you heard? Just so that it's fresh in your mind when voting time comes around, who's full of it and who's not. So I just want to give you a quick breakdown of what different I want to say agencies are doing, what they're doing now about the whole reparations, and what what that can mean for America, because America knows that if we're taken care of, the money is going to go right back into the economy. And that's not a bad thing, because this is where we live. So of course we're going to spend some money, but we're also going to do business investments with each other. The problem is, the reason why we can't do those investments is because the lack of capital. That's why our businesses fail. That's why, the job will work it till we're almost dead, and then nothing to pass down with generational wealth. But thank you for joining KTSE Now, and check out the article. I'm gonna leave the article in there and the study.